Israel released footage of a significant tunnel network under the Shifa hospital, and Hamas continues to conduct very close-range attacks all across Gaza City. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 7 a.m. Central on Thursday, November 23rd, 2023. So for all of you in the United States, happy Thanksgiving. Overnight, Israel announced the death of one of their soldiers during ongoing combat operations. The Gaza Health Ministry updated their casualty statistics, saying that 14,532 Palestinians have so far been killed. That includes 6,000 children, and that 35,000 have been wounded. Now, it's worth noting that the Gaza Health Ministry information is at the very least vetted by Hamas before it's released to the public. I have gotten some comments asking why I add a caveat to the Gaza Health Ministry data, but not to the Israeli data. The reason for that is when Israel puts out information, you recognize right away that it's coming from a government source. So you can apply whatever degree of skepticism you feel appropriate to that information. Gaza Health Ministry could sound on its face like an independent third party, and it's not. Everything in Gaza is and has been for a long time run and managed by Hamas to some degree. So I think there's value in adding the caveat that information coming from that ministry is to a degree coming from one of the two belligerents in this war. So the IDF released about 20 minutes of footage in and around the Shifa hospital tunnels yesterday. I'm not going to play it all here because it's 20 minutes long and a lot of it's pretty repetitive. I'm going to get into a couple clips that I'll show. But if you want to look it up, go to the IDF Twitter accounts in English or in Hebrew. Same for their Telegram accounts. You can go to their website or just search Shifa hospital tunnels. You'll probably find plenty of this online. Just look, once you see a tunnel underground, how many more minutes of footage do you need showing the exact same tunnel walking in a straight line, right? Don't want to waste your time. So one of the clips here I want to walk through, I think it's sped up and it's pretty good run through of what's been uncovered so far. So we've got a tunnel shaft just outside of the Shifa hospital, and then they'll head down underneath. Sped up, I don't know if this is like 3, 4, 5 times the speed, but it's great because some of this stuff you don't need to spend minutes upon minutes moving through like this. So multiple doors, we've got a bathroom, potentially a little lodging area there. There's some kitchenettes they show for cooking, a couple different staircases in and out of this complex, ventilation, electricity running through there. It's pretty substantial, right? And again, a lot of these tunnels look very similar to the tunnels. That's the clay where they stopped digging. That's where the tunnel could have continued in another direction. That's what it looks like underground. During the construction of these tunnels. It looks just like all the other Hamas tunnels where they put out the footage showing their fighters in these networks. It matches it, one for one. So this is just outside the Shifa hospital, and Israel says that some of this went underneath the hospital itself, at least a couple of the wings. They're continuing to uncover more of these areas. Again, every step of the way has to be deliberately cleared, has to be cleared of booby traps. Watch out for Hamas fighters sticking their weapons through some of these firing ports that we saw in the first video. There's one of those blast doors there. So very slow progress, very slow process. I imagine we're going to see more and more footage over the coming days. This is just going to be a standard dump. Israel putting out more and more from inside of the tunnels. Now, on the one hand, good. Israel released more footage of these tunnels they claimed were under the hospitals. I know I'm going to get some pushback on this. I don't think these videos proved a lot, to be honest. A couple of reasons here. For one, we know that Hamas has tunnels in and around the Shifa hospital complex. I mean, it's been discussed for years, kind of an open secret for years. And at the very least, earlier this week, Israel released their first video and picture footage confirming that those tunnels exist. So, that box has already been checked. If anybody at this point is continuing to argue that Hamas doesn't have tunnels or there are no tunnels in and around Shifa, I don't know. What are we really doing at that point? The second piece here is that I think a lot of folks are waiting for these tunnels to be proven to be some sort of military infrastructure, which probably to a lot of folks means, a stash of AK-47s, RPGs, IEDs, things like that Israel comes across. For some of these videos, it's not exactly clear. They might have found some of that in the tunnels. Remember, there's a very deliberate clearance process. Some videos showed just a whole array of weapons laid out above ground. It's not clear if those are actually pulled out from underneath or not. I don't think that really matters. And the reason for that is if weapons are uncovered in the tunnels, you'll have people say, so Hamas just left those behind. They knew Israel's coming and decided to leave these weapons. They must be staged. And if they're not there, then people say there's no weapons in those tunnels. So I don't know that finding those weapons, finding that military equipment is going to be the smoking gun people necessarily think it is. That said, these tunnels at their core, the reason these tunnels exist is for military purposes, right? So when they were originally built, they were used to smuggle goods into the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm sure there was some clothing, some food, some fuel, but how do you think Hamas got rockets, IEDs, explosives, AK-47s into Gaza? It's through these tunnels. This is their logistics network. It is integral to their military capability. So like the tunnels at their core, their existence serves a military purpose at baseline. Whether or not Israel finds underneath this hospital, stashes of AKs in the corner. Now, the last piece that I think a lot of people are going to be looking for is evidence and proof that these tunnels around the hospital were used as a command center or headquarters. And look, I don't know what that's going to look like at the end of the day. The only thing I know for sure is it's not going to be a command post like we would envision it in a Western military. Hamas doesn't fight like us. There's no reason to expect their facilities to look the exact same. I think what will end up happening is that over a period of time, weeks, even months, Israel will uncover a bunch of these different tunnels. And when you step back and look at this in its entirety, you can see a vast tunnel network with bathrooms, with kitchens, with lodging facilities, maybe some military storage, some communications areas, and all of that together, the sum total of all of that is just so substantial that it could be called a headquarters. So good. I'm glad Israel continues to release footage of what they're finding in and around the hospital. I don't think one video is going to do it. It's going to be, dozens, even hundreds of pieces of evidence put together over the course of weeks. And let's be honest, even then, there's probably going to be people pushing back saying it's not what Israel said it was. Now, overnight, Israel arrested the head of the Shifa hospital as well as a handful of other senior officials from the facility after footage was released over the past couple weeks here showing that hostages had been moved into Shifa hospital on October 7th, that weapons were found in and around the complex, and that multiple tunnels had been uncovered on the hospital grounds. A spokesperson for the Shifa hospital said that they are going to stop cooperation with the World Health Organization around patient transfers and evacuations due to the arrests. So the point of contention here is that for a long time, the hospital staff has maintained, the ones on the ground there have maintained that there is no Hamas presence around the hospital, that there are no tunnels, there's no weapons, no military activity. So what it looks like is Israel taking some of those folks into custody for further questioning to find out more information around the evidence that they are uncovering on the hospital grounds. Now, Hezbollah up north in Lebanon put out a graphic showing their estimates of how the attacks have gone against Israeli targets since October 8th when they first entered the conflict. Hezbollah says that they have forced the displacement of 70,000 Israelis near the northern border, which sounds like a lot, but it's probably pretty accurate. The most recent statistic I've seen says that as many as 200,000 Israelis have been internally displaced, both north against their border with Lebanon and then south and around Gaza. The graphic adds that Hezbollah claims they've so far inflicted 354 human losses. Now, I'm not sure if, in terms of Israeli soldiers, most likely, but it doesn't specify that. I'm not sure if they're counting wounded in that number, or if that's their claim of just the Israelis killed in the last month and a half. If killed, I think it's a little bit high. There have been casualties in the north, 100%. But even going off of the Hezbollah footage that's been coming out and analyzing, if you just dig through those clips, most of their strikes are against infrastructure and cameras, things like that. 354 seems a little high on the northern front. But look, the attacks are definitely ramping up between Hezbollah and Israel. Just in the past 24 hours, Hezbollah announced that they carried out 12 additional attacks into Israeli territory. And now all of those are coming with retaliatory strikes by Israel against Hezbollah targets. And in the past 24 hours, Hezbollah put out that another 5 of their fighters were killed in clashes with the IDF, bringing their total losses, according to Hezbollah, the publicly released information coming from Hezbollah, to 85 since October 8th. So Hamas put out a little more footage yesterday showing their fighters taking on Israeli forces in Gaza City. A couple big takeaways here. One, it's interesting to see the Hamas point of view as they are, on the defense against Israeli forces here. The city's just in complete ruins, which isn't a surprise based off of really any footage we've seen in and around the city at this point. But that offers Hamas a pretty significant ability to hide and effectively maneuver without being seen on Israeli forces. So You got to think Hamas already, this is their backyard. They know the territory likely better than anyone in the Israeli forces. Add on to that the destruction of the buildings. They can now move between walls, between structures, and then all of the tunnel networks. Pop down, pop up, fire an RPG, get back in the tunnel, move somewhere else to fight another day. Now, there's an interesting clip here showing just how close the Hamas fighters are able to get to some of these Israeli vehicles. You see the crow system there on top, right when it looks away. So it's scanning the opposite side of the vehicle. Fighter runs up, places a magnetic mine, a magnetic charge in the back of the vehicle, and they go ahead and detonate this before any Israeli troops exit that vehicle. But, just very, very challenging in an urban environment like this to fully grasp your surroundings in all directions at all times. And I think we're seeing that more and more. Then shifting outside of Israel for a moment, the USS Thomas Hudner, which is currently in the Red Sea, shot down multiple one-way attack drones yesterday launched from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. Now, this is the second time in 2 weeks that the ship has intercepted drones or missiles overhead. Of note, the last time this happened, the U.S. said that they believed the drones were targeting the U.S. ship. They didn't put that out this time. They didn't talk about where the target was or what they think these drones were targeting. But the Houthis did put out a statement saying that they launched a batch of winged missiles at targets in Israeli territory. So, look, most of the Houthi launches appear to have been at Israeli targets inside of Israel, not necessarily at U.S. forces in the region. So that would check out. Hopefully, the Houthis aren't planning on striking those U.S. ships in the region. Then earlier this week, U.S. forces at Al-Assad Air Base were attacked with ballistic missiles fired by Iranian-backed militia groups. The U.S. responded with an AC-130 that was overhead at the time, just unlucky for those militiamen, and then 2 airstrikes against associated facilities in the region, which in total killed 8 militia fighters. And that was put out by the Hezbollah Brigades group, who are not happy about that attack, to say the least. They put out a statement earlier today saying, quote, "The crime of the American bombing of the PMF headquarters at dawn today, in which 8 martyrs rose, has not passed and will not go unpunished, which requires expanding the scope of targets if the enemy continues its criminal approach." So this is, we've seen some one-off statements from some of these groups in Iraq and Syria saying they're going to start targeting more forces, but Hezbollah Brigades is a pretty significant element in that region. So it's just notable that they're threatening to expand the scope of targets as they strike U.S. forces in the region. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out these sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. Substack now also has ad-free, sponsor-free videos that go live about 1 hour before they're published on YouTube. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.